and are just some of the words that you may hear in today's podcast. Enjoy! Hello and welcome to the Perfect Information Podcast, a board game podcast with its feet in the muck but its head in the stars, with me, Ben Maddox, and the man who always goes rock,
Yorgos Panagiotitis.
Georgios.
Did you know, by the way, that this is my original Kryptonian name?
Georgios.
No, that was 3 times my original Kryptonian. I'm Georgios, son of Pangios, house of Jos, apparently.
Oh, so does it get, shorter?
No.
Do names increase on Krypton? So, your son is like Georgios Osmanos.
No, he is Legios.
Oh, right, what does that mean?
He's my son, of the family of Jos.
So if your son is, really annoying you...
Yes.
Can you, just put on, lead gloves and wave kryptonite at him and he just goes to sleep? I mean, that must be an advantage for your Kryptonian parent. I mean, if you could get kryptonite...
Right. You try not to use green kryptonite.
I didn't realise there was anything other than green kryptonite.
No, there's red kryptonite, obviously. Obviously, there's black kryptonite.
Well, because I've taken the red pill, Georgios.
Yeah, that's...
So I see what they're doing.
I'm not quite sure if you... I'm starting to think you're colorblind and you either took the blue pill by accident, which is why I've been sitting strangely for the last 2 hours. And if you're still sitting strangely 2 hours from now, you should probably go see a doctor.
Look, I think I've been trying to elucidate this through the last couple of episodes, Georgios. Right. When you're sat this far away from me in an enclosed space, I don't need no blue pill, love. You know what I mean? It just happens naturellement.
So, let's segue into something else.
So what are we talking about today then, Georgios?
I would like to talk about gateway games.
What would you like to talk about gateway games about?
Gateway games. I think gateway games are an interesting topic because I don't agree with them. Or rather, I don't agree with the application, the concept of them, the way we talk about as gamers of gateway games and how we sort of classify gateway games. Because I think the concept of a gateway game, of a game that leads you into the hobby, is solid. It makes sense. But the idea that such a game needs to be of a certain type, I have opinions of.
All right, so let's go back to the beginning. So
yes.
We've entitled this The Myth of Gateway Games.
We did, yes.
Now, I assume it's not just the fact that you're Greek.
No.
I mean, although, you have a natural affiliation towards the myth as a concept.
Yes, but I'm also talking about the expansion of the word myth. Commonly myth implies some sort of falsehood, or at least unreality.
Do you know what the big problem is with the Judeo-Christian world? The god itself.
I don't know.
You look at the ancient Greek pantheon, right? You've got Zeus, right?
Yeah. Fucks everything that moves.
That's the point. Zeus, that's a god I can get behind. Turn into a bull,
probably
sex with a lady.
You probably shouldn't.
Or behind is probably the only safe place for Zeus, isn't it?
That's a good point, yeah.
Probably, he's a god though, so he's probably got a cock coming out of his bum as well, isn't he?
If he wants to, probably.
Double shaggage.
That's the best shaggage.
Anyway, sorry, you were going on about games.
Myth, actually.
Yes.
And the idea that calling it myth, not in the sense that they don't exist, but that there's this entire narrative surrounding gateway games, how we think of them, how we treat them, who we think they're for, and what kind of games aren't obviously gateway games because they are somehow different from them. That entire random collection of thoughts that comes in when we talk about gateway games, that's what I want to tackle.
Well, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because since board gaming has become more to the forefront, it's developed more scrutiny, there is much more media. Mm-hmm. This idea of gateway games has fractured and metastasized, and now you don't just have gateway games, do you? You have next step games, and you have mid gateway and half gateway and total gateway and all of these sorts of things, because it's born out of a desire to inculcate other people, I think. Mm-hmm. And so people are searching for ways to inculcate other people and finding the perfect ways to inculcate other people, because I think part of it stems from wanting to play more.
Yeah.
As we become adults, we think, if I can recruit more people, I'll have more opportunities.
Yes, but also, you want to share the joy, literally. I mean, it's fun to play board games, and if you know somebody who you like. Why not, share something you enjoy with them? So, yeah.
But also, I think it's part of when something becomes more than a hobby, something that you think about a lot.
An obsession.
Yeah, I didn't want to go that far, but I couldn't think of anything in between.
All right, and mid-obsession then.
The gateway game thing is all part of this sort of very odd, bizarre lexicon that gamers talk about. You see them all the time, these big forums of what sleeves should I buy, or where do I buy those crossy elastic bands so my games don't fall apart when I'm carrying them, and all of these weird things that I participate in, but to the outside seem hopelessly arcane and bizarre and sad.
Well, I don't quite know about that, but it's not. I think it just shows that the hobby has gained more and more depth as a culture, because in any other hobby, in any other pastime, you will find if there are enough people there devoting time and effort in whatever they do, they start focusing in on details. Let's start with let's say miniature gaming, painting and stuff like that. I think this depth and detail is innate to any hobby that just gains a lot of steam. And that includes sleeves.
To anything. I think it's a great testament to the infinite creativity of human beings. Yeah. When you think, I mean, how difficult could painting a miniature be? How many different techniques could there be? How much, sort of hidden knowledge and new things could there be? And every day more and more happens about this insignificant, I mean, the grand scheme of things, absolutely insignificant, pointless thing can become this labyrinthine, almost infinite path down which you could travel. And I think that's a positive. I don't think that's a negative.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. So I think the reason why I went on this tangent was basically, I'm not quite sure it looks sad so much as it looks very geeky, in the sense of very, very intensely focused on something that you're very passionate about, and you don't really care what others think.
Yeah, but we'll come back to our topic in a second. But just on that, I think people can say, oh, board games, he played board games, that's not my thing, but I understand, and being into it and having loads. And I see you get together with people and you drink beer and you have a laugh. People don't think that's sad. Well, I'm sure some people do, but I mean, that you can sort of defend. But as I say, it's when you're talking about elastic bands and sleeves and trays that you buy from DIY shops and things like that. But then people go, wow, but you're excited about a tray from a DIY shop? My God, what have you become?
Yeah, but I mean, I remember looking at buying a new laptop. And I do this every couple of years, every 5 or 6 years, whenever I buy a new laptop. I start looking into these details, and I'm always overwhelmed by the amount of nonsensical abbreviations and numbers, and sort of, I'm quite certain there are tech freaks out there who love this detail. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's sad. It's
we adore jargon as an animal because it puts us firmly within a group, and we love being firmly within a group.
Oh yeah.
Whether it be sport, whether it be games, whether it be tech, whether it be science, whether it be academia, the enjambement, you know what I mean? There's not loads of people who know what the word enjambement, and the minute you come out with the word enjambment, it puts you in a very specific category, and we love the warm, cozy feeling of being in a group of people that we feel are like us.
Well, identity isn't useless, yeah.
In a perfect world, right?
Oh, okay.
Let's go back. Let's define a gateway game. And I want to do 2 definitions.
Right.
What is sort of held as a gateway game? Mm-hmm. And because you obviously have opinions on this, what you consider a gateway game to be. And that might just be the thing itself, or you can bring in the purpose of it. It can be a verb, or it can be a noun. This is fine. So define away, young Defino.
Right. So I think one of the most common ways that gateway games are looked at are as games that are simple, that are short, have a theme or at least a presentation that seems inviting and not too scary or too nichey. So basically it should be a family friendly, if possible, in the widest sense of the word. A theme and presentation, the rules should be very simple, and it shouldn't take too long. So basically of all the possible games that could be out there, we're looking at a small subset that is very pared down to what the hobby can offer.
Okay, so the classic gateway game, right? The one that everyone cites as the gateway game is Ticket to Ride, okay?
Right, yeah.
How does that fit within your definition?
Well, I think, the presentation, the obvious one, I mean, it's very colorful. It's very bright. It doesn't seem to, I mean, the cover itself is full of, these 19th century people.
Victorian people. You know that underneath, all of those men with the big moustaches who are there with the top hats and the suits, underneath, they're wearing girdles and ladies' underwear.
I'm quite certain
That's why they're grinning so much, Georgios.
I think it's the butt plugs, personally. But anyway.
They must have been fashioned like out of wood in those days. You know what I mean? Imagine if you had like a
That's
carpenter.
what makes them exciting, You don't know if they're going to splinter if you sit down.
Oh, can you imagine, though? And you go to a cheap carpenter because you don't want your wife to find out. So you go down Spitalfields and Mr. Johnson, and he can't really sand it properly because he's got shit quality sandpaper. Right. So every time it goes up, you get a little sort of wooden barb up your ringer. I mean, God, can you imagine being a Victorian man? The pressure, Georgios.
From behind.
If basically. I want a butt plug now, I just go down to Mr. Perv's Sex Emporium of Love and Fuck, and I say, I'll have that one, the Destroyer, please, young man. And he walks over and he gets me the Destroyer and he says, would you like me to insert it for you, sir? And I say, yes, no lubo, please. I bend over, right up there, and then I get a little padlock to keep it in, and then I'm off away down, pick up the kids from kindergarten, go to the cinema. I mean, it makes, I fidget a lot in the seats when I'm watching the movie, but it's wonderful. I can't imagine the privation of being a Victorian man. Anyway, carrying on, how does it fit into being a gateway game?
Well, the presentation is obvious. The game itself is fairly clearly structured in that it gives you very, very clearly defined options what you can do on your turn. It's either pick up a card or play a bunch of cards, and that's it.
The thing is about Ticket to Ride, and I think what gateway games kind of have to be is they're very intuitive.
Right, yeah.
We understand the notion of going from A to B. That is, you don't need to have that concept explained to you because any human being understands that as a concept, right?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I can either segue right into what I think a gateway game, what I look at a gateway game as, because that's tightly combined with those two. And the idea is basically that I think, as you mentioned before, the purpose of the gateway game is to get people into gaming, to show them that there is fun to be had in a game, to get them to sit down, to get them to engage with it. And I think it's a common misconception that people who are not gamers will be, by definition, turned off by complexity. They will be turned off by non-family friendly themes, and they will be turned off by, let's say, a very competitive game or any kind of game that puts a certain amount of pressure on you that you might not be comfortable with right away, even though I've often argued against these kind of things. And I think what Ticket to Ride does very, very well, and why it, I think, has surpassed Catan as the number one gateway game that's more or less accepted, is that the rules themselves, and you said intuitively, I think the key is really to explain the game concept, what you do and why you do it and how you do it in a way that is immediate. The clunkiest way to do this, to get this immediacy, is have a very, very short rule book. But even Ticket to Ride sort of hides a lot of its complexity in easily recognizable concepts like connecting A to B, and how you do that. It's printed on the map. You don't need to explain, you need to lay out tracks or whatever.
And what's really interesting for me is when people talk about gateway games, what they don't talk about.
Right.
And I think because they think it's implicit, it's obvious. But you look at the most successful gateway games, and it's not, no one ever talks about Munchkin. No one ever talks about zombie dice, really. What they are is not just simple, but absolutely engaging. That's what because it's not just about getting a person familiar with the concepts of a game. It's getting that sparkle in a person's eye and that engagement with it. And wow, this thing can do this. And that's what a gateway game needs to be, right? It needs to be a combination of things. And as you say, not necessarily complexity, not necessarily simple as opposed to complex, but intuitive as opposed to counterintuitive.
Exactly. Right? You want a gateway game should be a game where things make sense, where you don't feel like you're diving into a lot of extraneous rules, exceptions and special cases and edge cases. You want something that is, I want to sort of steer away from the word intuitive because I agree with it. I just want to sort of tackle the same idea from a different angle. But like you said, the engagement, I think, in my experience at least, the engagement has a lot to do with how quickly you feel comfortable with making decisions within the game. So basically, you're far more likely to be engaged by a more complicated game the moment you realize how things work.
Right.
So is this somewhere between laying out a game in a way or designing it and presenting it in a way that shows obvious connections between the things you can do, the things you should do, or the consequences of what you do, and how you then manage to have a person there to explain it in a way that invites people in as opposed to pushing them away. And then we go back into this entire tangent of how not to explain games to people who haven't played them yet, including maybe explaining victory conditions before you start playing and stuff like that. So there's this entire field that you need to look at for a good gateway game, like the person explaining it. And then you have the game itself that needs to be easily explained and apparent.
I think the ideal gateway game could theoretically come without rules in the box.
Oh.
Because and I don't mean this as rules complexity, that's not what I'm talking about here. But if you think about certain sort of classics, Scrabble, Monopoly, whoever reads the bloody rules to those games? Nobody ever does. When a game, and the difference with something like Ticket to Ride as opposed to Monopoly is Ticket to Ride is engaging and good and innovative and, rewarding and not just a slog, and it's quick and it does all of those things a good game should do, right? But it should, if you want to be the sort of archetype, the paragon, it should become folklore and not just a product. And I think Ticket to Ride has a chance of this in maybe 20 years' time. Monopoly is completely subsumed by Ticket to Ride, and you just have families at Christmas and everyone knows the rules. They become folk games rather than being this sort of arcane thing that's very difficult to access.
Right. Yeah. No, I can see that. Yeah. The idea of, it comes down to exposure in the end. I think, both Monopoly and Scrabble have been exposed so heavily in households, in media, that people sort of pick up certain ideas. Like, obviously, I was watching a TV show the other day where two of the characters are playing Scrabble. And basically one of the characters occasionally, as they put down a word, they say the word and then they say a number and he writes down the number. And just from watching those two people play, you can sort of piece together how Scrabble seems to work. And at some point, one of them says he a double word score or something. And that's essentially Scrabble. That's 80% of the Scrabble rules.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can easily pick it up. So I think maybe sort of instead of the perfect game being a game that doesn't need rules, maybe should be a game that you can more or less learn by watching others play it.
So let's go back to your definition.
Right.
What do you think? So it is a gateway game and its purpose and its role within this whole hobby that we participate in.
Well, I'm not going to give an example because I'm not entirely sure I have one that I would be willing to defend, because there might be exceptions. But, basically, as I mentioned before, the idea of a gateway game being something that, well, as you said, engages people, sort of unlocks some sort of insight into what it is that draws people to board gaming. And there are many, many things that can draw people to board gaming. There's the puzzle of certain games, the challenge, there's the competition, the friendly competition within the game. There's the camaraderie, mostly in co-op games, but not necessarily so. There are all kinds of aspects that can be really, really engaging and fun and exhilarating about board games. And a gateway game manages to transport these aspects to a person, to give them like a good idea of what it is that makes board games great. And then either make the choice of joining in or going, that's not for me. Maybe not everybody wants friendly competition. Maybe not everybody wants the challenge of a puzzle.
So I have a theory, right?
Oh, yeah.
I think the gateway thing is a myth.
Okay.
And I can only base this on my own experience.
Right.
I'm not a scientist. I haven't done studies on this particular things,
And a lot of other things, though.
Yeah, binoculars. Let's leave it at binoculars, Georgios. Right. So anyway, I think there's this myth about gateway games and this idea that there is this concept that you can have to convert people.
Ah, okay.
That they proselytize, that you can take this unrefined savage and you can hone them through playing Ticket to Ride into this urbane, civilized board gamer, right? And I don't think that's possible. In my experience, so firstly about how I got into games, there was something just in me very receptive. And I think most people will share this. Once I started, I just fell into it really quickly. Mm-hmm. And I didn't go and, all of these endless talks about, okay, so you've played Ticket to Ride. What's the next step? Well, I went from Pandemic to Trajan, right? And that's not because I'm a savant or anything. It's just I had this predisposition to really want to get into it. And this is what people were talking about. These at the time, this is the game people were saying is the acme. And I wanted to try the acme.
Right,
Once you get into something, you want to try the best. That's why whenever you read a sort of bio of an author, you go to the bit which says their highly regarded book is considered this. And you go, okay, I'll try that one first because I want to do the best. So this idea that you have this thing that can convert a person into a gamer is a myth. It doesn't exist. People fall into it because they have a real desire to fall into it, and complexity is not an issue.
Yeah. Just following on this idea. Well, my experience hasn't been with the introduction to gaming as a whole, but I've seen the idea of gateway games, or as you mentioned, there are mid-gateway games. The idea of certain games introducing people to certain genres of the hobby. For example, one player might want to introduce his gaming group to heavy board games, to train games, 18xx games, or maybe social deduction games or what have you. These are the kind of questions I occasionally see and hear. I have friends who are playing games, but I really want to play X. I really want to play, I don't know, Twilight Imperium, for example.
Well, you ain't going to be curious about 18xx games unless you've gone a certain distance down the line, right? You know what I mean? That sense of a gateway, I think, is plausible, actually. You have this game, which is a gateway 18xx game, which has all the facets with a lot of the complexity stripped away.
Yeah.
But that's not converting people into gamers. That is someone who's already deeply entrenched in the hobby because, you know, the interest in 18xx games comes after a long time, you know.
Possibly. I mean, I could imagine somebody being really, really excited about trains, and of all the things that, you know, gaming offers, for some reason, they might really like the idea of an 18xx game. I'm not mocking this idea. I'm just saying, I could imagine this being true of people. But yeah, no, the idea of the gateway game converting people, I think I'm agreeing with you. I don't think games convert anyone. I think they open up facets. Well, they show facets of a hobby, and it's up to you whether you're receptive to it or not. And I think it's perfectly fine to not be receptive to it. I mean, you're obviously lesser of a person if you don't like games, clearly. Not much lesser of a person, just a bit.
Well, I mean, it depends what you define as less of a person. I mean,
not liking games.
Technically speaking, I mean, if you're an amputee, you're less of a person, right?
Whoa.
No, Georgios.
Well,
physically, you're less. You've got less of your body than you had previously. I mean, that's a quantitative thing. It's not a qualitative thing, Georgios. It's not a racist statement or whatever term you apply to amputees.
Ben, stop digging.
But that's true, isn't it? I mean, technically, you're less of a person because you lost an arm, right? I cut my toenails the other day.
So now you're less of a person?
Yeah, because I've lost some of my body.
Okay. I mean, shaving with you must be
if you do have amputees out there, I mean, you know, I've got nothing against you. I've got nothing against you.
Yeah, it's very important to point it out.
But, you know, I mean, I'm just saying quantitatively.
Yeah, no.
I don't know how we got down this rabbit hole, George.
Just throw the shovel away. Just throw it away.
But they might be able to answer the question, what is the sound of one hand clapping? That's all I'm saying, Georgios. That's all I'm saying.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it's not about conversion for me. What I think a lot of these games that people cite, like The Resistance and Ticket to Ride and Pandemic and all of these that are gateway games, what they are for me is not a gateway game, but a game I can play with non-gamers. They're an engaging thing I can play with my mates who are non-gamers who I know aren't going to get into the hobby in the way I am. They're not going to be playing through the ages in 6 months. It's just not going to be a fact. But they may say to me, oh, you're into that shit and I don't want to go out and get hammered tonight. You know, my kidneys are starting to give out on me and my skin's gone all yellow. So do you want to come round and, you know, play some games? You bring one of your nerdy games. And so you bring one of those and you know that there are certain games that are simple enough, but also engaging enough that for that particular situation, you know you're going to fill the night well. And you're not going to have people going and looking off into space. You know you're going to be able to engage these people who won't think about those games more than likely again for the next 6 months until they invite you around until, you know, they're full of remorse and there's loads of blood in their piss. And then they'll invite you around again, right?
Yes. Thanks for that image, by the way. No, I want to jump off of this idea of simplicity you mentioned. Not instead of simple, but, you know, easier. And I think it's interesting that in that context you mentioned Resistance, because I think Resistance is a surprisingly complex game, but it hides all of its complexity in the meta game that you need to play the game with. It's been, let me just lay out why I think that way. Because it's been my experience with a lot of people I've played this game with that certain players find resistance inherently intuitive. They completely understand what they need to do, why they need to do it, and how they need to do it. But I've had just as many players, just no matter how often you explain all the intricacies of why you should lie, when you should lie, the ways you should lie, and how you can lie without saying anything, and when you should do that, and how you recognize when other people are doing that. They still can't wrap their heads around, because I think there's a certain layer of complexity in reading social interactions that comes natural to certain people and not quite as easy to others. And the Resistance banks a lot on all its players being at least somewhat familiar with reading a lot of social interactions and sort of deducing motive behavior or possible motive behavior and intention in it.
Well, I have a certain personality.
Right.
I mean, I would call it sparkling.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I would call it sparkling.
You would indeed.
I mean, there are people who would use other adjectives, Georgios. I assume most of them are positive. I don't listen to them, but I assume they are. Anyway, so I attract a particular type of person around me, you know. Right. So I rarely run into this situation where there is someone sat around a table playing a game like Resistance who's just befuddled. Mm. Because where their befuddlement comes from is not the game.
Yeah.
It's human interaction. It's
actually no. No, it comes from the game. It doesn't come from the written down rules, because those are fairly straightforward.
Well, it's the allowance for you to bend convention in a way that certain people aren't familiar with.
I'm not quite sure what you mean by that.
Well, so I've got a guy in the board game group who will not play social deduction games.
I have a lot of people in my group who will not play social deduction games.
And the reason he says it is he just doesn't get it.
Right.
He can't read people in that way. It's just not, it's part of his makeup. He's not wired in that way. But that's not, and the game promotes that and maybe heightens that. But that's a problem he carries through his life. And I think if you have those problems, the Resistance is going to be that. And if you don't have those problems, the Resistance isn't going to be that.
I don't think I agree with that. No, I think, well, the point I was trying to make earlier is not that, there are people who aren't capable of reading social deductions or making social deductions based on social interactions, but that for whatever reason, they're just not accustomed to it. They're just not, trained to it. They just, for some reason, they have rarely been in a situation where they needed to train those skills. And as such, when they are asked to use those skills in a game environment, they are struggling, much in the same way, say, younger kids are struggling with math-heavy games. It's just not a skill they've been trained at yet. They're not familiar with probabilities. They're not familiar with, distribution of certain cards and stuff like that. If you train them, if they get more familiar with math, if they start to realize, all right, I know how addition works, I know how multiplication works, I know how as soon as the skills are there, the game is accessible to them. And that's completely ignoring the fact whether they enjoy it or not. It's just accessible to them. And I think this is a stumbling block that the Resistance hides by asking you to use skills that, at least before social deduction games were so widespread, just weren't very common.
Well, it assumes you have those skills before going into it.
Yes.
That's what it is. And I agree with you absolutely on that in terms, if you're not someone who has honed those skills or had to use them in your life,
right,
the assumption the game has is that is a normal state of human personality.
Right. Yeah.
So we're all going to be of a certain proficiency at that before going in the game, and that's assumed, right?
Exactly.
In the same way that we understand in Ticket to Ride, A to B to C to D. You don't have to explain that concept, right? It's something that exists. I mean, kind of what I was saying, I think, and I think we agree broadly, is that something, it's a skill set that's not specific to games. It exists within a wider social context,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. I think with Ticket to Ride, basically, you sort of need to understand, again, if you want to play it with a minimal amount of competency, you need to understand the concept of distribution. You need to understand how many cards, how likely is it that I'm going to get 7 white cards together? If everybody else draws out white cards, how likely how many connections can I actually put together with my limited amount of trains I have?
And that's why people who've never played a board game before, but they've played rummy and they've played poker and all of this, will instantly say, how many red cards are in the deck?
Exactly.
How many yellow cards? Because those are skills, those are folk skills that we have, that we bring over to this. And people intuitively understand, okay, I need to work out if what I'm doing has any purpose, because if I've got 3 of them, I need 5 of them, and there's only 4 of them, there's very little chance I'll get it right.
Exactly. And basically, yeah. And then again, this also ties back to this idea of like we mentioned before, we're just repeating ourselves now, intuitive, or at least, available. If the information should be available to you that you can make an informed decision, and it should be fairly easy to deduce what you can do, what you need to do, what you should do. Yeah, it's the idea of a gateway game in that sense, in this perfect world, would pick exactly those kind of folk skills you mentioned that are fairly common in most people, even those who don't play games, and build the rule set on those skills. Like the Resistance does for people who are sort of social active in a way, probably want to, for lack of a better word, as opposed to people who have played any kind of card game before and know that, distribution matters.
Okay, so just to wrap up then.
Yes.
Gateway games, as the general populace define them, games that are there to open the gate to the secret garden for people to go around and play in and pick up the apples and touch the teats of the deer and all of that sort of stuff. You didn't do that as a kid in the garden?
No.
Touch deer's teats?
Well, we didn't do anything with teats.
I mean, if you touch them, a deer's teat,
yes,
it'll become very tumescent. And then it becomes like a little tasty berry that you, hello, dearie. And the deer,
see, when we said,
ears go like that.
See, when we said that this is going to be a not family focused, but adult focused podcast.
Yeah.
It never occurred to me that we'd go down this road.
It's not a sex thing, Georgios. It's a warm feeling of childhood thing, Georgios.
No.
Don't tell me how to live.
We've been recording this long enough. Everything's a sex thing to you.
Anyway, but in that conception,
right?
Forget about the garden. Forget about
the sex
sucking the deer's tits. Do we need them? Gateway games, I mean. Do we need them?
Well, that's no. Yes, no, and yes, no.
Okay, that's very clear. Thank you.
I think so, yeah. I'm basically Theresa May. I've been very clear about this.
You must be the guy behind the May campaign.
I am indeed. I'm very clear about this. I'm going to leave now. I think gateway games are defined by purpose and not by what these games are like. I think, yes, we need gateway games in the sense that any game that gets people playing is a good thing. I think you can hone a design and a presentation of a game in such a way as to be more likely used as a gateway game. Like we said, I mean, somebody might play Ticket to Ride, might play Resistance, might play When I Settlers of Catan and not care about it at all. And then they sit down to play 18xx and they go, wow, board games can do that. This is what I want. So I don't think the quality, the type of the game matters. It's the purpose. And as far as purpose goes, it's strongly guided by the context it's been presented in. So basically, if you're mates with someone, you can sort of see what kind of stuff they're into. You might realize they will not respond well to Ticket to Ride or through the Resistance. They might respond well to Cosmic Encounter of all things. They might respond well, I don't know, to Shadows of Camelot. They might respond well to something far more, to the Civilization board game, which takes 4 hours. Who knows? But yes, I think we do need gateway games, but we need to work on using games as gateway games as opposed to waiting for a game to be a gateway on its own. We just need to put people in front of it.
See, I don't think we need them in the sense that I think people will find the key to the gate and they will open the gate themselves. This idea that we have this raft of sort of things that will convert people, I think, is a myth. I don't think it exists. And what I would say, if any publishers or designers listen to this, don't design gateway games. Don't go with the implicit idea of designing a gateway game, because what will happen is you will have an anemic, overly simple piece of unengaging rubbish. What you should do is you should design to the purpose you wish to design. And then games like Ticket to Ride will crop up. Games like 18xx will crop up, and I think certain people are very good at refining and refining and refining. And after playing Ethnos by Paolo Mori last night, it seems to me that he has been working towards this through every iteration of his designs.
Actually, I would amend what you just said with the idea that I think the desire to create a gateway game also has led to a strong push to simplify rules, which again is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, to make them more accessible. I think that's a probably better term for it. And actually, we're going to pick it up probably again when we talk about the review game later. But the idea of honing it down, of designing to purpose and not to audience, I'm very torn on this. I'm very much, I can see sort of both sides, but I'm slightly leaning towards designing for the audience, making it accessible, making it easy to grok, if possible, not by simplifying things too much, because I'm sure there are games that sort of cut away something for fear of becoming too complex, of not being gateway enough, and that's a shame, I think. But I mean, who knows? I think it's legitimate to go for this audience. It's a legitimate motivation to design a game that is more accessible to more people than, having this idea of like this is the theme, this is the purpose, this is the concept, and I will not stay away from it. Audiences be damned. There must be some sort of middle ground.
I'm not a board game designer, and I'm a pretentious asshole, and so I'm truly of the belief that you create for yourself.
Three of the things you said you said three things. Two of those are true.
and the hope is that you're not a complete outlier in the world. You're not a complete weirdo, and so the things that you create for yourself will have some resonance with other people. And when I create things, that's what I go for.
All right, fair enough.
Anyway, Georgios.
Yes.
I'm going to get that big iron key off the wall, and I think Bambi needs a right good sucking.
Good evening, sir. Take a comfortable seat, slide into a complimentary pair of slippers, and enjoy our hospitality. Welcome to the guild.
Ooh, Georgios.
Yeah.
Look at this.
It is, people are alive. It's great.
Can you hear can you hear the smiles, Georgios?
No, but I see a whole lot more teeth than I used to, yeah.
That's right. I mean, there's old General St. John Smythe there. He's wearing yes, last time I saw him, he was in a worsted with a waistcoat.
That is true.
Now he's in a pair of bell-bottoms, Georgios.
Yes, and for some reason he's dyed his hair purple.
And it's gorgeous as well.
It's a very strong purple, yeah.
I mean, it's deep purple, isn't it? Which, ironically, is what they're playing over the stereogram.
Yes, the stereogram, I remember, yeah. I was kind of wondering what there was.
Well, the thing is, the climate has changed here.
It has, yeah.
But it's very recent. So within here, they haven't re-upped the technology yet.
Clearly, we're back in the 70s is what you're saying. We've been taken back to the 70s.
Well, they bought an 8-track in 1976, and they haven't upgraded since.
Yeah.
And so we've got quite a bit of Deep Purple, bit of Sabbath.
Always got a bit of Sabbath.
Bit of Bolan.
You want to have Bolan.
He's a good-looking fella, Bolan.
Yeah.
He's a 20th century boy, isn't he?
Your pop culture references are very, very different to mine.
Levi's adverts, Georgios.
They're actually far worse than mine, I realise now.
My entire music collection is predicated upon Levi's adverts, Georgios.
Oh, man.
And that's why my mum got angry when I put all those rocks in the washing machine.
I can see where she's coming from.
That's a Nick Cayman 1980s Levi's advert reference for all those funky kids out there.
Well, no, those funky kids would... Well, if there were funky kids, they would know that, but they're not funky kids. I mean, we're funky kids.
That's right. I decided, since the sweeping political changes have happened after the recent polling, you'll notice that all my grey has disappeared.
Yes, it has been... Well, are you having sideburns as well now?
Yeah. And a big droopy moustache. And I've just gone, Corbyn crazy. It's the 70s again, Georgios, and this isn't the winter of discontent. This is the summer of love.
No, it's the winter of the disco tent.
That is high-quality punnage.
It is, yeah.
So, Georgios...
Yes?
What was Los Cuestiones?
Oh, I thought the sentence was going to continue.
No. As you know, in Spanish, Los Cuestiones is the question.
It's actually the questions, because it's plural, but what?
Well, it's an interesting linguistic fact. They don't pluralise in Spanish, Georgios.
And it's also an interesting linguistic fact. Fuck you.
Which ironically is Spanish for "you're looking lovely today."
No, it's not.
It's a false friend, Georgios.
Ah, yeah.
Like that doll.
All right. The question was, how do you know a game is played out, brother?
Excellent. I mean,
That was a Shaft quote, by the way.
I mean, you could be my brother, couldn't you?
No.
Why not?
Well, unless, all the good genes fell into one side of the family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you got all the Levi's, and
Yes.
I got all like the Lee Max, and they're crap.
Pretty much, yeah. Yes, we had responses by people who heard us and then responded. One of them is Senor Brian Gardin from Polandia, which apparently is a region in Spain.
It is. It's southern Spain.
Southern Spain,
That's where the jamon comes from.
The jamon, I see.
Yeah. Jamon, we're late.
Jamon with latest.
Is what they say a lot.
Yeah, they do. All right, so any Spanish listeners have now been properly insulted.
Loads of Spanish listeners, I assume.
Loads of Spanish listeners. Listeners.
Is that Spanish for listeners?
Yes, it is listeners and their friends and family.
You speak all the languages, don't you?
All of them. Brian Girding writes, if you feel like you are forcing yourself to get it to the table, or if it felt like you were playing it just to make sure it got played, which I think makes sense. The idea of sort of feeling obligated to play a game suggests that there's not a lot of enthusiasm to actually play it, which implies it's time to find a home for it.
I mean, I have a home.
Yes, because you've been played?
Yeah, exactly. I consider myself a game on which to be played, Georgios. And you know what the winner gets? It's
Syphilis?
exactly not syphilis, Georgios. Much. And anyway, with antibiotics, Georgios, it's not an issue. I can share the wealth.
Of bacteria.
Is syphilis bacteria? Is
I have
it
no
viral?
idea.
I don't know. It's something, but it's a cock disease that we
speak
can
the-
all get behind.
We speak the languages. We do not actually have any knowledge.
Well, the point is, Georgios, syphilis. Henry VIII killed him, didn't it?
Yes, so basically you have a royal illness?
Royal bollocks, Georgios. That's what it's called in Worcestershire. It's called the Old Royal Bollocks.
It is.
Oh, John down road. We don't speak like that in Worcestershire, by the way. John down road. Oh, he's got a terrible dose of Old Royal Bollocks.
Yes.
Is that right? Is he coming blue? All over the sidewalk. We don't use the word sidewalk either. That was an incredibly realistic impression, Georgios.
Of somebody making an incredibly unrealistic impression of whatever it was that you tried to impress.
It's just boxes within boxes within boxes that you open up, and in the middle, it's the Old Royal Bollocks.
It is, in fact, the inception of bullshit we're playing here, right?
I mean, do you have anything that you feel forced to get out, or have you... I'm talking about games here, Georgios.
Obviously.
Or do you, are you unencumbered by such earthly pulls?
Occasionally, my eyes wander over my shelf and I find a game that I haven't played in a long time, and if I happen to have the right amount of players and the right players coming in on that day, I'll give it another try. But in general, there are not a lot of games that I feel forced to play. Maybe the slight exception being review games, where I feel like, I have to play it again just to make sure. But for the most part, it's never been, much of a issue. I've never felt like, I don't want to play this game. Most of it is just interesting. Even if I didn't end up enjoying the game, it was still, let's see why it doesn't work for me. What doesn't work about it? Where do I think the strengths are? Where are its weaknesses? And where does it not connect with me?
Seafall. I went in there with loads of vim and enthusiasm, and someone asked me, one of the people who were playing the campaign with me last night said, what about Seafall? And honestly, the pit of my stomach fell out of my asshole, Georgios. Such was the thought of playing that game.
Is that why it's all, tapered up here with papers and stuff?
That's why the whole floor is covered in polythene.
See, I assume you were going to kill someone, but,
No, that's done.
All right, excellent.
Okay, so let's go on to Ivor Bolokov. Oh, bollocks.
Oh.
What does Oh, bollocks say?
He says, the only ones I can think of that are played out are some war games where I've essentially played them enough to have explored the decision space except for edge cases. And then the Arkham Horror LCG seems to be reaching their point in record time, though I don't see the replay value in it at all.
Well, this is the issue with narrative games, right? if the narrative is built in very strongly into the experience of the game, once you've experienced the narrative, it's kind of hard to go through. And I don't just mean legacy stuff, because, I got into an argument on Twitter one time about...
An argument?
Yeah. I mean, very, very good-natured argument, of course.
Obviously.
And someone had just misdefined legacy. They were talking about Descent being a legacy game, and things like Arkham Horror LCG, and it's clearly not. I mean, what defines legacy is the legacy aspect, that you just can't go back, right? Once you've made a decision, that decision is completely tied in, and that's it, you're done. Whereas these narrative games, you can go back, and you can play them over and over again. They're resettable, but if the narrative is very strongly entwined and very much part of the experience, it's very hard to replay that narrative again, right?
I guess. Yeah. I mean, two things come to mind. One, to me, an important element of legacy games has always been the idea of unlocking depth as you play.
Also,
I'm basically more or less stealing from a Rob Devio interview I've read once, where, Rob Devio isn't actually listening to our podcast, which is great.
I assume.
Yeah. So I can say anything. I think what he tried to say was, Yorgos Panagiotidis might be the brightest mind currently in board gaming, but then he said, and I'm quite certain, I think it's on paper, and then he said one of the ideas that sort of influenced the origination of the legacy game was unlocking new rules as the game progresses.
Just bright, the adjective bright.
Yes.
Does that have an American meaning that's different to the one in English?
No, I don't think so.
Floppy cocked or something?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, good. Then we're on the same page. Yeah. Anyway, carry on.
That's what bright means, right? That's how I've been using it.
Floppy cocked, yeah.
Yeah. Brightest mind I have.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the idea of unlocking more and more of the game as you play along, I think was, at least in the, as far as I've read, part of the origin of the legacy idea. The fact that you alter the game in a way that does not easily allow you to retrace your step, or you're not supposed to retrace your step when you play, I think is probably the second layer. There might be a third layer, I don't know.
I mean, I think that's what defines it for most people, though, isn't it? The transgression, the ripping up the cards, the writing on the board, the putting stickers, the permanence of it. I mean, when you open up the box of Risk Legacy, it says something on it like, going forward, this will never be the same again. And it's all talking about not the narrative unfolding, but the permanence of what you do, the ongoing backability, which is a word. Which
it now is a word, yeah. And the second point, the idea of the narrative a narrative game being losing its luster when you play through it, I think has a lot to do with how that game defines itself, how it's sort of designed, what kind of experience it's supposed to provide. I think there are a lot of games that generate narrative that I find very engaging and very much fun, but I can still replay those games. I think one of the games that has had the longest lasting impression on me, just as an experience I want to revisit, is Battlestar Galactica. I always feel it provides a strong narrative. There's these ups and downs, the moments that change the experience, the moments that sort of flip things on its head. Everyone invariably inhabits a character. They play a character within this small world of the game we play. They have their own small history with certain players. I'm not talking about the characters you play from the show. It's just you as a person sort of become this character. It's a slight exaggeration of who you usually are, because you are aware that you need to lie, but not too much. You need to make decisions that sort of show you've been a good president, or you've been a lazy president, you've been a good admiral, you've been a bad admiral, stuff like that.
But that's prescribed narrative. That's not prescribed narrative as well.
Yeah.
That's not like the Arkham Horror LCG, which is, you go from A to B to C to D. What Battlestar Galactica does beautifully is give you the skeleton onto which you build the narrative of every game.
Exactly. The fascinating thing, I love gushing about Battlestar Galactica, the fascinating thing about this game is that this building is not a conscious act on part of the players. You don't go into this game thinking we're going to tell a story now. The story sort of is told in the actions you take, in the decisions you make, and in the way you interact with other players. And even it's such a small thing like commenting on a certain player not aiding in a vote. Even they all sort of step by step, everything you do sort of step by step adds to the plot of the game. And that's what makes the story that unfolds so purely board gamey.
And that's why it's not, and that's why it doesn't have this falling off a cliff element of replayability.
Yeah.
Because even though it follows a similar structure, the story is always different, and there's always something new to discover. And that might be even playing with the same people, or just the introduction of one new person completely changes that dynamic. You know what I mean? I mean, it is in many ways a masterpiece, I think, that game.
Oh yeah, I think it has its flaws. I think it's, right now, I think we can more or less tell it's certain rules are a bit clunky. I don't want them to put out another edition because I just managed to pick up all the expansions.
But the experience it promotes is almost unparalleled. Okay, so I assume this man has webbed feet and gills. It's Mr. Amphibian. So what does Mr. Amphibian, Matthew Curtis, have to say?
I'm still baffled, just even after all these years. The English language still holds so much nuance for me to discover as a non-speaker.
I mean, the vowel sounds.
Yeah,
you just got to know it, George.
Yeah,
you just got to know it. So this is Mit Curtis. What does he have to say?
But we pronounced it differently before.
You just got to know it, Georgios.
All right, so it changes.
It's your untrained ears, Georgios.
It probably is. He mentions repetition. When more than 3 sessions play out in a very similar or identical fashion, I'm done. And this is an observation that I find very, very well observed because I'm good with the words.
Yes.
I didn't realize that, but I agree completely. The moment a game plays out the same way, the experience is not in any way different from playing with somebody else.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's the Machikoro thing. Now that's crystallized it for me.
Yeah.
I played it 3 times or 4 times or however many, and it was exactly the same experience every time, and then suddenly I just feel such a strong distaste at the pit of my stomach at the thought of playing that game that it's absolutely played out. And it's not about variable setup.
Yeah.
It's about going from A to B to C to D to E to F to G to H in exactly the same way every time.
Well, there's more than that. I think for me at least, it's the experience itself. Do I feel like having played this game in this way and having played it at a later time, do I feel any difference in these two experiences? Or was it basically the same, it just happened at a different time of day maybe? And I think I'm tying it back to another thing. I think that a lot of people who complain about multiplayer solitaire, at least those who feel strongly about multiplayer solitaire, are in a way mapping some of the experiences with this phenomenon. The idea of, if I don't interact enough with people, the games are going to be too similar next time I play it, and then I have a game that I've played 3 times and then I have no desire to go back because it will feel too likely. Now, regardless of whether the term multiplayer solitaire makes sense or is legitimate, it seems to me that the distaste for it has a similar origin. The idea that, if I play something that promises to be unique, to be an experience, to be fun, to be enjoyable, whatever, and it just keeps giving me back the same experience, the same feeling over and over again, I'm done.
And that's the thing, if you could... So, I got to a point with Machikoro.
Right.
Is I could have just got a piece of A4 paper, written down my moves on it, just given it to one of the players and said, I'm going to go and piss off and have a beer. Just do this on my turn for me.
Right.
And probably the outcome would have been the same. I might not have won, I would have lost. But this idea that everything is prescribed and you know exactly what to do, that's why when people talk about the Puerto Rico thing,
all right, yeah,
that you need to pick this role at this point, so number 2 is going to pick that, number 3 is going to pick that, number 4 is going to pick that, and the opening 20 minutes is absolutely prescribed in the way games like chess become. That, to me, is absolute death.
Yeah.
It's just so soulless, and this sort of protectionism. Why did you take that? Now you've given the game to number 3. Well, because look at you people. You're just doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Also, you're not a number. You're a free man.
That's right. And also, I run around a sort of weird village in Wales, chased by a big balloon.
Yeah. I love that show. I love it ironically, to be honest, yeah.
Anyway, Georgios, well, post-election, Corbyn is in Downing Street. Looks like the world is suddenly a sunny and better place. Blaze.
What?
Blaze.
Come on, wake up!
What? What?
Ben, you've been babbling.
What was I saying?
Well, you've been scratching your scrotum for the last 25 minutes, and then you started speaking.
Did I issue forth from my man part?
Not your man part, no.
Why were you stood above my bed watching me for the last 25 minutes?
Regardless, you've been hallucinating.
Well, it's all right though, because Corbo's prime minister now. And
Well, first of all, you've been hallucinating. Corbo is not an actual person. This is a mental institution. You've been here for 20 years.
oh my god, what about Janine?
You had a stuffed animal called Janine. We tried to give it to you, but you did naughty things with it, so we took it away about 8 years ago.
I just have one more question.
Okay.
Is this real?
It's crass, unsophisticated, and emotionally manipulative.
It's this week's review.
It's crass, unsophisticated, and emotionally manipulative.
It's this week's review.
Welcome back to the 1963 World Championship Tournament. This is round 2 of what many experts consider the decisive conflict between these two nations. For the United States of America, we have Gobsmack McGee, a colourful character that managed to impress audiences with flashy exploits in Cuba and a strong showing at the UN. His opponent is the no less formidable Ivan Ivanosovich, nicknamed Boris, a quiet and very defensive player who has so far not shown a great penchant for decisive or lasting action. The opponents are now checking the 3 agendas presented to them and have settled on one. McGee picked his with confidence, and Boris seems indecisive, but has now hesitantly put it down. He appears flustered. As he takes this first move, units are placed in Berlin. No, in Cuba. No. Berlin. No, it is television. Investment into propaganda. A full 3 cubes, pushing his DEFCON rating up. That is a bold move. Unexpected. If he isn't careful, he might become the villain of this piece. McGee responds quickly. A bold placement of even more troops in the Atlantic. He is doubling down on military presence. No weakness is shown. Boris responds. Still hesitant, placing troops. No removing troops. No. He chooses a different play. No troop movement at all. Instead, he takes advantage of a current event. Oh wait, what's happening? DEFCON ratings are pushed up. Incredible. Gobsmack McGee has pushed the US military into DEFCON 1. It's over. The US has lost. What an upset. I'm going to need a cup of tea now. This is Sinclair Wigglesworth signing off from 13 Days.
Yeah. Skip to the end.
It's the one sentence review.
Tense, rigorous and disciplined, 13 Days barrels through the Cuban Missile Crisis, and while it threatens to explode, it never quite does. And it's all the better for it.
A precise design that presents you with a taut play experience, 13 Days does what it sets out to do in an exemplary fashion, yet couples it with an earnestness that tempers enthusiasm.
Georgios? Ooh, what's that in the corner of the room?
I don't know, but it's eating peanuts with its nose.
Plagiarism, Georgios.
Okay?
That's
Which is
a
Spanish
word.
for plagiarism.
The elephant this week, Georgios, is the accusation
Los
of plagiarism.
acusaciones.
Yeah. It's great. I get to learn Spanish
you can.
while doing the podcast. It's wonderful.
Brilliant. It's brilliant.
Is this just a 20-minute rip-off of Twilight Struggle, Georgios? That's the question.
Esta una 20 minutes ripoff di Twilight Struggle. And the answer is, I don't know.
Yeah, me neither. The problem is neither me or Georgios have played Twilight Struggle.
It seems big and bulky. Now that's not number one on the Board Game Geek, whatever it is list, it also doesn't seem that interesting anymore.
And the problem is, with Twilight Struggle, it's that thing, and we're going to be talking about Twilight Struggle for 2 minutes now, but the point is,
even though we haven't played it.
It's a two-player game, and I just really find two-player games hard to play.
Really?
Hard to play, because a 3-hour two-player game, because when I go to Board Game Group, so 13 days is perfect, because 20 minutes.
Yes.
So it's like, we're waiting for Johnny to get off playing this game, so let's have a quick game of 13 minutes.
I'm quite certain that 13 days has printed playing length of 45 minutes, which I found strange.
Yeah, because it's 20 minutes.
I think you could probably turn it to 45 minutes if you really, really want to, but all the games I've played were about 20-30 minutes.
Yeah, and so I've spoken to people who've played Twilight Struggle.
Journalism, I see.
Indeed, and they tell me that 13 minutes
it's a different game.
13 minutes, yeah.
I like the cleverness of the 13 minutes name, but it's a different game.
Yeah, it is. The 13 days is basically Twilight Struggle done better, in fact. They've told me that the streamlining really helps, that there's not this great big hurdle that you have to get over to enjoy the game and play the game well, which I've heard with Twilight Struggle, that you have to have an encyclopedical knowledge of the cards in the game, otherwise you'll get destroyed, or you just won't be able to do anything that's relevant or exciting.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are quite a few games that have these thick stacks of cards with various effects on them that are, that you have to sort of memorize, and if you want to use them tactically, strategically. One game I know that I've always felt had exactly the stumbling block. Too many cards with too many unique abilities is Dominare by AEG. I really like this game, but for the most part, you feel punished for not knowing the cards well enough. And I think part of it is this mistaken assumption that you're supposed to know these cards. A lot of these big deck of cards in these games are all about giving you surprises, unexpected twists and turns. And it's only when we, for some reason, decide that we need to play on a high-end strategic level, that we need to plan everything in advance. We need to weigh in all the possible options, all the possibilities. And in order to do that, we need to know every card that's available in the deck. That's where you get into this big hurdle. And somewhere in the middle, somewhere there's a deck, the depth of a deck of cards.
Well, the thing is, I think one game that does this very well, there's a lot of cards.
Right.
And when you instantly look at it, you think, ugh, it's going to be difficult. But actually, the way it's done, the way those cards are implemented, they're all variations on a theme.
Exactly.
So you kind of know, and that's Guilds of London. And I think Guilds of London does that wonderfully well.
All right, interesting.
Because you have all of these different actions, and you have what seemingly, arcane iconography. For the first 10 minutes is a little bit difficult to grasp. But after that, you're drawing cards and they just affect different colors or different areas. And so you're familiar with all the cards because the functions of the cards are used very economically.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, that's exactly the distinction I would draw as well. The idea that if you enter a deck of cards, just a variation of the same ideas or same set of ideas, that's easier to grasp than if you have 120 cards with about 90 different abilities, which is more or less the case in Dominare. Right. And appears to be the case in Twilight Struggle. And, turning it back, is not quite the case in 13 Days, but we'll get to that in depth a bit later.
So, what did you think of my interactive, candid photo montage?
Well, it was certainly an experience.
So my first experience of this game, Georgios, was being whooped mercilessly by the designer of it.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
And I'm thinking, Asterisk or whatever his name is. His name's Asterisk, isn't it? Or something. Asterisk Gerund or something, isn't it?
Well, he's named after... I think we made this joke before. He's named after a grammatical category of verbs.
Exactly. He looks like...
A gerund?
Well, no, he looks like one of those droids in Blade Runner. He's tall and blonde and seems to have no soul.
Oh, Ryan Gosling.
That's right.
Yeah.
He looks like a baby goose.
Yes.
If Asger, you're listening to this,
You're a goose.
you're a goose. But that was my first experience, and it was an experience at a con.
Right.
And it's a great experience for two reasons.
Okay.
One, because, I'm at a convention.
Mm-hmm.
And, the games I play at conventions always seem to have this slightly different sheen than games I play elsewhere. So the memory is a little bit more burnished and a little more golden,
Yeah.
And also having the designer teach you the game means that you're not going to get any of the fucking rules wrong, right? So you're going to play the game properly.
Not necessarily, though. I think we talked about this when we talked about rule books and how difficult they are to write. Game designers sometimes struggle with keeping all these variations of the various rules during the development in their head. And I think it speaks to the elegance and to the precision of the design in 13 Days that I'm quite certain that Asger did not screw up any rules.
No. And that's the point. And then every subsequent play I've had was really intuitive, really tight, really interesting. I think we'll come onto this in the design part. There's one aspect to this game that for me is genius.
Right.
And that constantly ramps up the tension. This is the DEF CON track. Mm-hmm. And the rest of the game is good.
Right.
But this DEF CON track is glorious.
Right.
I find it akin to the Outbreak track on Pandemic, when it gets up.
Yeah.
Except with the DEF CON track here, there's much more management involved.
Yeah, I think most of the tension does come from how you manage the DEF CON track. And I think tension is more or less the theme of the entire game. That's where my experience, I think, probably slightly differs from yours. Again, we didn't play with each other. We played with different opponents. My experience with the game, I'm not sure whether I should start with the nitpicks just to get them out of the way. They're not weighty.
Get the nitpicks out of the way, Georgios.
The nitpicks, as I understand it, the copy we have is the first printing, and there are some unfortunate errors printed on the cards that you can look up on Board Game Geek as well, which leads to some confusion when it comes to resolving certain agendas, which is how you resolve at the end of every round.
Yes, so basically, I'm sure everyone's aware of this, but it's that Twilight Struggle thing. So you have cards, and there are three suits. You have UN cards, then you have Russian cards and American cards.
Soviet cards and American cards, yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hair pedant.
Yes, I am.
And so, and basically, if you're the Russian player, for instance.
The Soviet player, yes.
And you play an American card. I'm ignoring you. I
know.
And you play an American card. You can command cubes, which is basically putting cubes on the board, which is a sort of area control element in the game. But you can't do the event because it's an American card and your opponent gets to do the event. Whereas if you play a Russian card,
Soviet card,
and you're a Russian
and a Soviet,
then you can either choose to command cubes, put cubes on the board, or take cubes off the board, or do the event. So it's that knotty thing of having an opponent's cards. Mm-hmm. When do you play that card so the event for them is less impactful, or the least impactful as possible, which is really nice. But then you have at the side this DEF CON track, and when you put cubes onto the board, it pushes the DEF CON track up, and it has 3 regions. And if all of your tokens are in the second region, you blow the world up. Or if one of your tokens is in the third region, you blow the world up at the end of the round.
Right.
So it's a constant push and pull about, you want to get as much stuff on the board as possible, but it's a constant push and pull because you don't want to blow the world up because you lose if you do. And that's really nice. And I found every experience I've had with this game tense and funny, and I played it against this guy who always beats me at games.
Right.
And so another quick rules thing, you play an agenda at the beginning of the turn and that's how you will score. But sometimes these agendas affect the DEF CON track. And he played an agenda and he forgot that it affected the DEF CON track. So when he resolved it, he blew the entire planet up.
Right.
And that was really good fun,
That reminds me. So let's talk about my experience now. And mostly my discrepancy between well, not discrepancy, but what I experienced and how it did or did not sit well with me.
Right.
And it starts with this rhetorical question, Benjamin.
It's rhetorical. You don't want an answer.
I know the answer, but you're free to provide it anyway.
Okay.
What is the best movie dealing with a nuclear arms race?
Dr. Strangelove, isn't it?
It is Dr. Strangelove. And what's the decisive, the definitive feature of Dr. Strangelove? It's a fucking satire. It shows the absurdity of the whole thing. It underlines just how petty, stupid, and irrational the entire enterprise is. I strongly feel that it's the only way to deal with this kind of topic. And
13 Days certainly isn't Doctor Strangelove, the board game.
But
right?
But you mentioned this one word earlier when you describe your experience. I want to talk about this one experience I had when I played this one. In one game I've played of 13 Days. I had this one experience that really crystallized to me why I think it's a very, very good game. I can already say I can recommend it to people who find it interesting because there's almost no flaws to that. But there's one thing that's missing, and that is, to me, humor. The one experience I had when I played this game, when we dealt out the cards, we looked at the cards, and we both started cursing at our misfortune. That was hilarious. That was funny. We enjoyed the game with this camaraderie, reveling in the Schadenfreude of the other being screwed, but also, recognizing that we're both sort of sitting on ends, that our hands are tied. This is really going to go badly for both sides. And that was funny. And I don't think the game really goes for that level of experience. I think what it goes for, and it's all tied into being highly respectful and being true to the historical events, is that it's supposed to be tense. It's supposed to be, very, very white knuckle, what do I do? How do I not give an edge to my opponent? And the only time when there's a release is at the end of the game when it's over. And to me, that was not enough. I needed tension and release. I needed them to be closer together. It was something, I think the game loses a bit as an experience itself because you only get released when it's over. You never get these releases. You never get these moments of achievement within the game, which you get in so many other tense games where you sort of do something, you sort of have a midterm goal, you reach it and you go, yes, I did it. And now my next step. With 13 Days, which goes over 3 turns, you resolve 3 agendas in total. These agendas don't seem to change much.
They're stepping stones.
They're stepping stones. So you never feel like I've achieved something. It's more like I have a slight edge next turn. And I think this is the one thing that again, let me reiterate, I think it's a very good game, but this is what it was lacking. And I think if this had been part of the design process, you would have to go lots of stuff back into development to put it in there. But if I had these moments of release in between, I would have been singing the praises of this game.
You see, the point is, and I think you're right. I think it's tense all the way through, and it's a constant push and pull between wanting to achieve what you want to achieve and not blowing up the world. And absolutely, there's no satire in there. There's no humor. It's not Doctor Strange of the board game. It's very respectful and very earnest. But, and I agree, I'm very much a believer in tension and releasing games. I think it's absolutely vital. You can't have a game that's a constant headache for 2 hours. Yeah. Because it just becomes tinnitus after a while.
Right.
But for me, 13 Days is short enough that level of tension maintained over 20 minutes is just right for me.
Exactly, but I think it works best if you play the game a number of times. So basically, if these 3 rounds you play just become part of a larger series of games of 13 Days you've played, then you kind of have the same experience that I'm asking for. This idea of tension and release. You have tension in the first game, then release at the end. You have tension in the second game, release at the end. But I want to look at it as a game in itself, as one complete game. And for that, the fact that it only lasts 20 minutes is immaterial to me. It doesn't change the fact that in order for me to be excited about it, as I was about Flamme Rouge, for example, which I think does tension release much better, and much more precise, I think it does not damn the game in any way, but it puts it in a certain category. To me, it says, this could have been a perfect game, but this is just in inverted commas, very, very good.
And the thing is, I disagree with you on this. I don't think you're right. Everything you say is correct.
You just don't want to agree with them.
But I don't come down on the side of it being a fault. I don't see it as a fault. I see this as because the goal you're looking for really is, I think every game designer, unless you're designing an abstract,
right,
is to try and have that melding of theme and mechanics and have what you're doing evoke that period. And the point is, it's not the Cold War. It isn't the Cold War.
Right.
It's the Bay of Pigs incident, which is 13 days of absolute unbearable tension in which the
Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah. The Bay of Pigs incident, yeah.
Well, it's not the same.
It is?
Well, not literally the same.
It is the same. The Bay of Pigs thing is the Cuban Missile Crisis because they had the missiles in the Bay of Pigs.
Well, the Bay of Pigs was the massacre, wasn't it?
No.
Well, where the attempt where the Kennedy tried to sort of send in, forces that were. We both have no idea about history.
We're going to pause here for a second, listeners. So I spoke to Professor Google, and George was bloody right. Sod you.
I'm sorry.
No, just. Anyway, but it's the Cuban Missile Crisis, right?
Yes.
It's 13 days of unbearable tension in which the whole fate of the planet rested on a knife edge. This is not the push and pull and the undulations of the Cold War, which would escalate and de-escalate over 50 years. This is 2 weeks of hell. And therefore, I don't have a problem with the whole game being this concentrated ball of tension in which you're just constantly trying to maintain sanity within it.
2 points. First, the question you have to ask yourself, and now we're moving, I always wanted to do that, but now I think this is a nice case. Well, moving away from just reviewing it as a good game, reviewing it to what it does, what its purpose is in a cultural context. What value does it bring to the table? And you have to ask yourself, what's the point of reliving these historical events full of tension? And at the end you go, "Ooh, I'm lucky you blew up the world before I did." Well, that's inherently insane and absurd, which is how I came to this connection to Strangelove. It is absurd that the moment of release is when your opponent blows up the world instead of you.
Or neither of you blow up the world.
Or neither of you.
I mean, the thing is, it's distinctly possible neither of you blow up the world.
Right.
In the reality, the world didn't blow up,
well,
right?
We did blow up. We're all in the Matrix now. You keep forgetting that.
That is true, but I have taken the red pill, Georgios.
Well, why not? A short while ago, you were talking about a blue pill. What's going on? Somebody's lying.
Basically, if you put a pill in front of me, I'll snaffle it down like an hungry pig, Georgios. I can take anything. But the point is, what is the point? Well, counterfactuals are a lot of fun, right? Counterfactual is wonderful fun. So many books are written. Fatherland is an example of a great counterfactual. The Man in the High Castle, all of these sorts of things. Yeah. They're fun. Modeling these great events that we will never be a part of is fun. What is the point? Is it absurd? Yes. Is it insane? Yes. I mean, it's very fucking clear that the mobilization of weapons that are possible to not only destroy us, but every living thing on this planet is bloody insane. And the fact that they exist probably 20 miles down the fucking road that we don't know about is also insane, right?
Some of what you say is indeed insane.
I mean, I'm getting a bit Alex Jones here, but and what is this game? Is this game damaging? Is this game satirical? No, what this game is modeling something we will never experience, and that is where I see the value. And I think the way it conveys that in this very short, intense package is really great.
I don't entirely disagree with you. I think again in this case, I think we're coming down different ends of the fence, sides of the fence. I want to really, be a big fan of this game, but these are stumbling blocks for me. If a game manages to create tension in the context of not reenacting, but alluding to the Cuban Missile Crisis, I want there to be a point to it. Just like I want there to be, again, my number one example for these kind of moments is Archipelago.
Where do you not see the point, though? I mean, the point is that you're trying to avoid. But your motivation when you play the game is, like I said, you want somebody else to blow up the world or to look less like a shitheel than your opponent. Which is blowing up the world is not what you're looking for.
But it's a victory condition. I think this is a decision, a design decision made that basically says, blowing up the world is fine as long as somebody else does it.
Well, it's a gamification thing, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
It's giving the game a result. But the point is, what you're looking to do is look less like a shitheel. And this idea that international relations and politics is somehow this great noble thing.
Nobody believes that anymore.
Constantly gets undermined and constantly is being undermined throughout human history. It's people with fragile egos playing games with each other that unfortunately affect the whole planet.
All of this is true. All of this is true, but I don't think any of this is touched upon by this game. And again, this is what I'm kind of trying to get at. I think there's a lot of talent in these designers to create these great experiences, and there's a lot of This theme is very potent, and it's unfortunately and scarily relevant now. But there's none of this is there. I think it seems to me when I played this game, and somebody else pointed it actually out to me, and then it made sense to me. It is more of a proof of concept. The idea of we can take this experience of Twilight Struggle and boil it down to a manageable length, which is, tight and precise and is tense and is enjoyable. And that's it. And I'm aware that I'm putting on absurd standards there, but I wouldn't do that if I thought these designers couldn't reach them.
Well, the point is, I don't agree with you, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And this is what art should do, and I think this game aspires to that. But we have to move on, otherwise, Georgios, we're going to be here all fucking day.
That is true.
Alright, so how about this? You take a tenuous grasp of reality, a lot of condescension, at least 4 cups, and a slow-wittedness masked through pretensions of prolixity.
Well, that's you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's design.
All right, so taking it away, just pulling back slightly from the cultural context in which the game exists and the message it's trying to put across, let's go back to the game as a game.
Okay.
What design elements within the game work for you, don't work for you?
I think there's very little that doesn't work for me. I think, again, the nitpicks, I thought some of the phrasings on the cards and the events are ambiguous or gets you stumbling. Again, there's this very unfortunate misprint that we only caught in like 3rd or 4th game in. Those are the kind of things, tiny things that I'm sure will be at least, well, the misprint will be fixed in the next, printing that I think, has actually been communicated. The ambiguities might be changed in the localization of the games, of this game in other languages.
13 Minuten, for instance.
No, it's 13 Tage.
I always call it 13 minutes.
I know.
Stop releasing the bloody games with almost exactly the same names, you dickheads. I get...
He's not that smart. He'll get confused.
A dysfunctional brain like mine gets confused with these things.
Yeah, that's 13 days. I think, the one thing that, again, first the negatives. We can both then, sing the praise of the DEF contract. But, the one negative I have is the deck itself. We alluded to when we talked about Twilight Struggle, which has this huge deck of cards which you need to memorize apparently to play effectively. In 13 days, you don't need to do that. There are, I think, 39 cards, I believe. You don't feel like, you're completely, screwed over because you don't know every single card, because there's enough maneuverability, there's enough things to change around as you play it.
Also, the events aren't super specific either. There are certain events that are, but mostly it's sort of variations on a theme again, isn't it?
Yeah, they're not that many ways in which you can, change things around. But, and again, I'm going to steal great insights from other people.
Yeah.
I've heard people worry about whether the game loses a bit as soon as you start to learn the cards themselves. 39 cards are not that many. If you've played this game 5, 6, 7 times, you kind of recognize a bunch of cards, and the more you play, the better you know the cards. The more you know what kind of card is waiting for you. And I haven't played it often enough to actually prove this theory, but I at least want to voice this concern that once you know the game too well, and I think I mentioned a similar concern with way back then when we reviewed Seven Wonders Duel. When you know the game too well, it shifts gears. It becomes this mathier thing, maybe.
Well, and this is the point, isn't it? I think both you and I agree on this.
Right.
When games become very small deviations in strategy, they lose a vibrancy and an immediacy that's fun.
Yeah.
That's, unfortunately, though, within a closed system, that's inevitable. Now, it might come quicker, or it might take longer to happen, but within a closed system, when you have a specific number of cards, a specific number of permutations of things, that is going to happen. But for me, it's never an issue. Because I don't play games enough. I don't play them multiple times.
Enough.
So,
well, but again, 30 days is a short game. You are most likely going to play it a bunch of times in one evening, in a sitting. It might be something you want to think about. And that kind of leads me to, if I have a criticism of this game, it's this. I feel the design itself does not allow for the kind of surprises, a clever plays that makes it, as you said, really vibrant. It's very, very tense, very focused. It's kind of like a fencing match. It's like you can feint, you can attack, you can defend, and maybe you can rearrange your footing, and that's it. You have a very limited amount of options, and you're trying to figure out what your opponent is trying to do. It's all, like you said, closed system, which is not necessarily negative, but it does run the risk of being too much a very, very constrained, controlled event that will not surprise you fundamentally as you play it.
This is so interesting as well, because I don't disagree with anything that you say. I think you're absolutely right in all your analysis of it, except all of those things that for you are little negatives, for me are great positives.
Oh, yeah.
I love that sense of it being a fencing match. I love that it's not super swingy. I love the fact that it's very delicate and your maneuvers have to be very precise and clever. As I say, I think the real saving grace of this game is its length. I couldn't live with that over an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Right.
There are games that are like that, and there are people who adore that. I prefer a bit more chaos if I'm going to play a bit longer.
I always prefer chaos.
But this intense thought and planning and discipline is wonderful over 20 minutes. I adore it over 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I think this isn't a game that overstays its welcome, definitely. But I'm very hesitant.
But I played this with a friend of mine last week, and we both said to each other, we finished and we looked at each other and went, fuck, that's a proper game.
Well, why wouldn't it be?
Well, because it's 20 minutes and you expect 20 minutes. You expect it to be things like No Thanks and Love Letter. Good, fun, distractions, but not, you get that feeling in your head and your body after you've played a proper game. That sort of, that was a workout there. That was a mental workout.
Okay.
Because Love Letter, for all of its positives, and I adore Love Letter, it's not that. Whereas this, we both came out of it and went, whoa, that's a game, that's a proper game. And in 20 minutes, and that, I think, I can't get over how much I admire that achievement. But I want to let's talk about the DEF CON track here.
Yes.
Because I think this game is very good. It's not my favorite game in the world, but I think it's very, very good. And I think I like it a bit more than you do. But
I don't know, but maybe.
But I genuinely think this DEF CON track, the way it guides the players, the way it's a way into the game, and the way it constantly pushes the tension and barrels you through the game is genius. I think this little part of the game is as good as it gets,
Yeah. Well, again, I'm starting to realize that what I really like about these reviews or these discussions of these games is I get to be negative. Yes, I agree with everything you said. It's brilliant. It's tension. But I did notice one little design cheat, which is the mechanical rule of always pushing up the tokens on the DEF CON track at the beginning of the turn, which you can't affect, which you can plan for, and you have to plan for. But it's kind of a not player decision based element that pushes up the tension in an artificial way.
I'm going to cite Mariner's Law here.
Yes. Which one?
Use your fucking imagination.
No, that has nothing to do with it. This is not the criticism.
The thing is, though,
that's not the criticism. Mariner's Law doesn't apply.
Well, the point is, I'll come back to you in a minute, and you can tell me what the criticism is before I just jump in. But the point is, even though it feels a bit gamey and a bit mechanical.
That is the criticism.
It's absolutely easy to tie it back into why. There are some games where you need to fudge that sort of connection thematically, but this is clearly the longer it's running, the more tense it's becoming, and independent of the actions of the people invested in controlling the situation. Tension is ramping up. It's unavoidable. Neither of them want it, but when it comes into the second phase, when it comes into the fifth or sixth day, just the inevitability of existing in this situation pushes the tension up. Right. That's how you justify it. That's how I justify it to myself, and I don't feel like I'm fudging it with that. It's very plausible to me.
No, I'm not saying that you can't find a explanation for it, but ultimately it's the way in which the DEF CON track sort of forces tension into the game regardless of how you play. You can't consciously decide to ignore the DEF CON track or play it in a way that doesn't strongly affect the DEF CON track, underplay it in any way. it's still going to ramp up. You're still, every time you're going to be busy, you're going to have to, the game forces this decision on you of having to decide, do I want to be aggressive or defensive?
Oh,
and
of course.
It doesn't let you off the hook regardless of how well you play in the
Right,
first
but
turn.
it's 13 days. It's the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's
Right.
tension. It's unavoidable.
It's not the Bay of Pigs.
I'm going to fucking knife you. Things are spiraling out of control. You know what I mean? And this is the point. And the DEFCON track is the absolute engine of this game.
Mm-hmm.
It is the thing that propels the game from its beginning to its end. Mm-hmm. I have absolutely no issue with the DEFCON track manipulating me as a player.
All right.
I like games
That manipulate you.
that manipulate me, that push me in a particular direction.
Okay.
I'm not a what's the word I'm looking for? Sandbox player. I don't like sandbox games.
But okay, I can see the distinction you make. I wouldn't necessarily agree that those are the ends we're talking about here. But
Because it's not as if it's not as if it's railroading you to the degree where it's saying you have to play this card now, you have to do this thing now.
No,
it's not. It's just propelling you as a player through the game, which I think is glorious.
Well, yeah, but again, I think I'm just saying, that it's a bit what's the word I'm looking for? It's a bit of a crude design decision to get you into this headspace, to force you into this decision regardless of how you play. Basically, you remove your ability to maneuver within the variant decision spaces within the game. Again, it's not a criticism, it's just an observation.
I mean,
my point, the thing that I want to talk about, that I really like about the DEFCON track though, is that it has this layered level of, basically you have two loss conditions or victory conditions, if you want to call them, baked into the DEFCON track. The way, how if three of the three markers, if all of them are on level 2 as opposed to level 3, which is allegedly the easiest one out of 5, but 4 and 5 aren't printed. Or if the world's opinion, the political track and the military track are on the level 2, you lose the game. At the end of the round, I believe, you lose the game. If at any point it pushes into level 3,
it's at the end of the round.
At the end of the round, you lose the game. And I think this is interesting because you layer two distinct loss conditions into one track or into one part of the game that's affected by the cards you play. I think this intertwining of your decisions into what you want to do to achieve this, the better victory condition, which is the prestige victory when you score your agendas, and while at the same time trying to avoid the loss conditions which your opponent might try to push you into. I think this creates really interesting tension. And this is really where the game shines, which is why the DEFCON track, I agree with you, is so central to the game and makes the game really work, even if it does cheat a bit to get you there.
Yeah, and the cheat is not something I care at all about. And it's beautiful just on purely game levels. Having that sort of the two variable loss conditions means you just can't spam one strategy.
Yeah.
It doesn't allow you to do that. Mm-hmm. But you can't say, all right, I'll just max the one track because you're going to kill yourself. And that's really, it inspires balance, but caution as well. It asks you to be cautious sometimes and to not be cautious in others, which I think is brilliant.
Oh yeah. I do wonder though, and this is just, a random idea that sort of popped up when I prepared this, I thought about what I would say in this discussion. I wonder if switching the victory condition from, if turning it from a loss condition into a full loss condition, saying, if either of you gets pushed into level 3, you all lose. Neither of you win the game. I do wonder if this slight change would have created a game experience that jive with my preferences.
Playing this made me want to play.
So, Georgie Porgy,
Who?
that's your name. Don't wear it out.
What?
This game made you want to play what?
Yeah, I'm going to cheat now in multiple ways. First of all, I'm going to name more than one game. And second of all, it's not so much that I want to play them, but that I'm just curious how certain elements of those two games contrast to what I experienced with 13 Days. And the first one is Archipelago, with its variable winning conditions and the way you sort of kind of trust or don't trust other players, and how the game might turn on you if you become too greedy. This push and pull that you mentioned with the DEFCON track. And I want to see how it how those two experiences compare. And the other game I want to play just for comparison's sake is Barcelona, The Rose of Fire. Again, because of how your own greed and desire to sort of get to the league, get to the top, be the best, or not the best, but get the most victory points sort of dooms you all. I think both of those games move in a vaguely similar genre of design ideas. The idea of your own ambition leading to your downfall.
Yeah.
So I think that's really interesting. That's really exciting. I just want to play them and see how do they work in action? How do they differ? How do they create different experiences? And what do the rules do to get you there? So those are the two games that kind of made me want to play, not Archipelago because I actually legitimately want to play it because I enjoyed it a lot, and Barcelona more because I still find it a very interesting game, even though I don't like it as much as both 13 Days and Archipelago.
You've inspired me, Georgios.
I apparently do that, yes, to people,
and not just erotically. I mean, you are. I consider you my teacher, leading me through the dangerous forests of my sexual awakening. But apart from that,
okay,
you've inspired me to play a game that deals with the same era, though not the same aspect of the era, not the war, but the simply living on the other side of the Iron Curtain, but does it in a very funny, obviously satirical way.
All right.
And that's Kojeka.
Right, yeah.
Which is the Polish game of queuing up to buy stuff in communist Poland. And it's a very witty game, and it's a very funny game, and it's very akin to Papers, Please, the computer game in that sense. Although Papers, Please is very dark, Kojeka is more poking fun at the idea that you have to try and buy a radio and things like this.
The absurdity is very much on purpose.
And they sort of deal with similar eras, but they look at them in a much, much different way, whereas 13 Days is very earnest and very serious and very respectful. Kojeka is anarchic and cheeky and very much more Swiftian in that sense.
Yeah.
Absurd and silly and fun. And I think they could go really well together as a pairing for the night, except 13 Days is limited by the amount of players. So, Georgie, should people go out and buy 13 minutes, days, hours?
13.5 days, yeah. I think if you listen to us throughout this discussion and anything of this sounded interesting or sounded like something you might enjoy, then yes, 13 Days I think is a very well exemplary design that does what it sets out to do very well. Does it, again, I think the earnestness, like I said in the one sentence review, the earnestness sort of at least sucks out my enthusiasm about the game. I can't now sing its praises, even though I can respect what it does. I can appreciate its, the competence in the design, the skill in it, but I can't love it because it's just too po-faced and honestly to be taken seriously by me.
You see, for me, the only caveat I would give for you not to buy this game is if you find it difficult to get 2-player games to the table. That would be the only reason. Because I think this game is fantastic. I think it's tight. I think it's knotty. I think the decisions are full of import. I think it has one design decision which is, as I said, as good as it gets. That DEFCON track, it doesn't get better. The way it propels you through the game. You're never left to flounder. You're never left feeling that parts of the game are soggy and unnecessary and that it takes too long. It's just the interplay between players, but the interplay between your own sense of hubris is absolutely glorious in this game. And I highly recommend go out and buy 13 Days.
Before the world blows up.